I had no view whatsoever.
When you said Reardon had a more realistic view of the meeting, can you explain what you meant?
Well, Reardon's mail says, maybe I'm being a dick, but there's no deal here. If we are smart, depth, and engaged at the right levels, we have a chance to cooperate on a few of these smaller things. So, usually if you have two people that go to a meeting, and one comes back and says, it looks great, and the other comes back and says, it doesn't look good, my business experience is the person who says that it doesn't look good is probably the one who has the most accurate view of the meeting. Particularly when you're dealing with Thomas Reardon and Dan Rosen.
So you thought that Reardon's view of how the meeting went was likely or the more accurate one?
In the sense that it didn't look like much would come out of it, yes.
Do you recall, as you sit here today, apart from just reading these emails, anything that was reported back to you by any of the participants from Microsoft at this June 21st meeting?
Well, I think somewhere about this time somebody said to me that asked if it made sense for us to consider investing in Netscape, and I said that didn't make sense to me. I didn't see that as something that made sense.
Do you recall who said that to you?
Would have been probably suggested in a piece of email from Dan, I think.
Do you recall when you got that suggestion, whether it was before or after the meeting?
Oh, it would have been after the meeting.
Okay. Do you recall anything else that anyone told you back in June '95 about the meeting?
No.
Did you personally devote time, Mr. Gates, to studying Netscape and trying to determine what their sources of revenue were?
And what time frame are we talking about?
Do you recall doing that at all?
I personally didn't make any study of it, but I know that in late '95, when we reviewed a bunch of different competitors, one of those was Netscape, and there was some revenue analysis done as part of that.
So what I want to ask you about is Exhibit 353. And this is the December 1st, 1996 email from you to Mr. Nehru. Examination has some bugs in it.
Work off of that one now.
All right. Do you recall asking Mr. Nehru about December 1996 to collect for you information about Netscape revenues?
No.
Do you recall sending this email on or about December 1st, 1996 to Mr. Nehru?
No.
Okay. Do you recall receiving from Mr. Nehru the attached email dated November 27, 1996?
From time to time, we do reviews of various competitors, and at least one point in time, Netscape was one of the people that we looked at. So it doesn't surprise me, but I don't remember it specifically.
Okay. On the second page of the exhibit, which is part of Mr. Nehru's November 27, 1996 email. He talks about browsers.
What page?
Page 2.
Okay.
He identifies their sources of Netscape's revenue. He says browser revenue for the quarter amounted to $45 million, a 32% increase over the last quarter, representing 60% of total Netscape revenue. Do you have any reason to doubt the accuracy of the information reported there?
Well, I know that Mr. Nehru didn't work for Netscape, so I'm sure he didn't have access to the figures directly. If you're interested in that, you should ask Netscape.
Mm-hmm. Was this the best information you had in December 1996 as to the proportion of Netscape's revenue that was derived from the browsers?
I don't know.
Do you recall receiving any other information on that subject?
I might have seen an analyst report.
I see the May 1996.
Well, it says here we're 70% confident about our numbers.
Do you recall why it was in this time frame you had asked Mr. Nehru to collect this information for you?
I don't think I did. I already told you that.
You have no recollection of asking him for this information?
I'm quite certain I wasn't the one who asked for the information.
Do you have any recollection as to who did?
Perhaps Steve.
Steve being Steve Ballmer.
Mm-hmm.
In your memo here, strike that, in your email here, you say, what kind of data do we have about how much software companies paid Netscape? Do you recall asking that question to Mr. Nehru in or about December 1996?
It looks like I sent him that question after he sent out one of these competitive analysis reports.
Mm-hmm. Do you recall, do you have any reason to believe you didn't ask him for this information on December 1st, 1996?
No, wait a minute. Now you're confusing two things. There's the information here enclosed, which I didn't ask him for, and that's what you've been asking me about earlier.
No.
Then there's the question here in my email. I have no idea if he ever responded to that, but that question certainly looks like came from me. But that's different than.
I understand. I'm not confused. Let me just see if I can straighten the record out here. Your testimony, as I understand it, is you believe that in all likelihood the information initially collected by Mr. Nehru was sought by Mr. Ballmer. Is that right?
I know it wasn't. I'm pretty sure it wasn't me who asked for it to be.
And then you got this email from Mr. Nehru, and you in turn asked him, what kind of data do we have about how much software companies pay Netscape? Is that right?
That's part of the email I sent to him. It looks like, yes.
Okay. I'd like to mark as Exhibit 354 an email from Mr. Gates to various people dated May 19, 1996, and the subject is some thoughts on Netscape.
Oh, sorry.
Exhibit 354, a memorandum you prepared on or about May 1996.
Looks like it is. I don't have a specific recollection.
On the second page, under the heading Netscape, you say, during this Think Week, I had a chance to play with a number of Netscape products. This reinforced the impression that I think all of us share, that Netscape is quite an impressive competitor. Do you recall what it was that led you to the conclusion that Netscape was an impressive competitor?
I think the memo speaks for itself in terms of outlining that.
On Bates number, page 954, appears the heading Browser War. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
What did you mean by your use of that phrase?
I think I wasn't the one who created that phrase. I think it was a phrase that some people had used to refer to the competition in the browser space, including that between us as the provider of Windows and Netscape with Navigator.
Under the heading of your memo titled Browser War, here's the following statement, quote, if we continue to have minimal share in browsers, a lot of our other efforts will be futile, close quote. Recall what other efforts you had in mind there?
Well, for example, our desire to get advertising revenue from the search button and the home page in the browser.
Do you recall anything else you had in mind?
I don't know if Blackbird had been canceled by this point or not, but since it was a superset browser, it would have fit that category.
Anything else?
Well, MSN, our online service, because of its dependency on the Blackbird technology.
Recall any other efforts that you had in mind here?
No.
You go on to say, quote, by the end of the year, we have to get more than 25% share so we are taken seriously, close quote. Do you recall why I came to that conclusion?
I don't remember what I was thinking at the time I wrote the memo.
Do you recall who you had in mind as taking you seriously?
At the time I wrote the memo?
Yes.
No, I don't recall.
What's your best estimate of what the Microsoft's after-tax profits were in fiscal year 1996?
I don't think it's good to guess, because it'd be very easy to go get the real figure.
And you'd have to get. I'd like to mark as Exhibit 361 an email from Brad Chase to Bill Gates, Paul Moritz, and Steve Ballmer, dated September 8, 1997. Does Exhibit 361 refresh your recollection that Microsoft, from time to time, conducts surveys of web professionals?
Do you want me to read this thing?
Just answer my question if you can. You don't have to read the whole thing to answer my question, and I'll point you to one particular page that I want to ask you about.
I haven't seen the document before, but it appears to be a specific case where some information is gathered about what the document seems to call web professionals. I don't know what they mean by that term.
So one of my questions, you have no understanding of what's meant by web professionals, sir?
In the context of this document, I don't. I can give you many possible definitions for the term.
you have any understanding as to the type of web professionals that were surveyed here?
If I studied the document, I could learn something about that. I haven't read it.
Do you have any reason to believe this document was not sent to you on or about September 8th, 1997?
No.
Did you recall receiving this memorandum?
I think I do.
Back on date stamp page 130, under the heading Desktop Web Integration,
Yep.
the memo states, concept of unifying the user's desktop and web experience sounds good and reasonable, but it's not clear this is what users want, and certainly is not what they expect. Do you know the basis of the statement made here?
He's talking about how to refine the desktop web integration. It says we need to do a better job, and he talks about how to do the integration and what he thinks is a different, better way.
Do you know the source of the information reports here to you?
I'm sorry?
Do you know what the source of his information was that he is reporting to here?
No.
He says in the next line, quote, many users expect to just get browser improvements with IE4. I've heard many a remark from users that they don't want to view their folders to look like web pages. Do you know where he obtained that information?
No.
Would you agree that it's fair to describe Windows 98 as not a vital upgrade for PC users?
Now, at the time that, according to you, reporters were suggesting that Microsoft was on the edge of doom, Microsoft had profits of over $2 billion in after-tax profits. Is that correct?
Well, I think it mischaracterizes what I said completely to say that I'm just suggesting it. That's really quite a misstatement.
Could I have a
So I did, and I did answer.
Read the
which
question
is-
back, please.
Is one of the assumptions of this paragraph inconsistent with what you told people publicly in 1996?
I think you're asking me to check for consistency with all the statements I gave during that 12-month period, and I'm not able to do that.
Of Exhibit 355, consistent with what you said publicly in 1996. In 1996, did you tell people publicly that Microsoft would do fine if internet software or browsers were free, but that Netscape would not do fine if internet software or browsers were free?
What do you mean by internet software?
What I mean is what you referred to as internet software in these various quotations.
I'm afraid we're not going to be able to know what my state of mind was when I gave that interview. If you want to define it, I'll be glad to answer the question.
Do I take it that your testimony is that you simply have no recollection whatsoever as to what you meant by these words in 1996?
No, it wasn't what I meant. I responded to a reporter's question, and I've already said to you that she must have given me a reason to understand what she meant in her questions in order for me to be able to answer them.
Do you remember asking her what she meant by those terms?
I feel pretty sure I wouldn't have used the term unless there was some understanding of what she understood the term to mean.
Why is that, sir?
I'm just saying it's not typical for me to use a term with a reporter where it's a very open-ended term that could be used in a lot of different ways without any understanding between myself and the reporter of, in that context, in that series of questions, what's being referred to.
Well, I'd like to draw a distinction, if I could, between having any understanding at all, which could come from a variety of sources, and asking the reporter for a definition. Did you ask the reporter for a definition of what was meant by Internet software?
All I can say, not recalling the specifics of the interview, is that it's very unlikely I would make a statement like that without some common understanding between myself and the reporter of what that term, which out of context is incredibly ambiguous, what it meant in the context of her series of questions.
And just to be sure I understand it, what you're saying is that you don't remember what the definition was, and you don't even remember that there was a definition, but you believe there must have been a definition or you wouldn't have been using these words. Is that fair?
There must have been a common understanding. I wouldn't say a definition.
How would that common understanding have been arrived at, other than through a definition?
Oh, somebody can give examples. I'm just saying there doesn't have to be a formal definition for two people to have a context in a conversation of what a word means. That is, neither one has to say, I define the word as follows. So maybe I interpreted your use of the word definition too strictly.
Okay.
So if you define definition for this conversation in a loose way, then I'll understand what you mean.
That is, what you need in order to understand the question is to have me define what is meant by definition.
At least loosely.
Well, what I mean by definition is what you meant by definition when you said that you wouldn't have answered this question unless you'd had a definition.
Common understanding. I use the word common understanding, and I'll stick with that.
In 1996, was there a common understanding of what was meant by Internet software?
In a context-free sense, absolutely not.
Was there a common understanding of what was meant by an Internet browser?
The whole notion of what the browser, what features it would contain, or what it would mean, or all that was very uncertain in 1996.
Let me ask you a different question. Do you believe that the publication of this article, and in particular the publication of a statement attributed to you, whether accurately attributed to you or not, that, quote, our business model works even if all Internet software is free, close quote, says Mr. Gates. Quote, we are still selling operating systems. What does Netscape's business model look like if that happens? Not very good, close quote. Do you believe that the publication of that statement affected Netscape?
Well, I know when people have been quoted in the press, competitors, saying how what trouble Microsoft is in and how much better their products are, that it's rarely had a direct effect on our business. I think somehow people rely on more analytical observers.
I'll move to strike the answer as non-responsive. Would you read the question again, please?
Do you believe that the publication of that statement affected Netscape?
What do you mean affected Netscape?
Are you telling me that you don't understand the question, sir?
Yes, that's what I'm saying to you.
Okay. By affected Netscape, I mean adversely affected Netscape.
Like hurt their feelings, somebody cried, or somebody in reading the article smiled.
Are you saying that you don't understand what I mean by adversely affected Netscape?
No, I don't know what your criteria is. I think it's likely somebody may have read it and disagreed with it.
Do you think it adversely affected Netscape's business prospects?
I think the general work that we were doing to do strong internet software had an effect on Netscape, but I don't think quotations like that had any direct effect.
You put in the word direct effect, and I know that you're a very precise person from the statement you've already made today. So I'm about to ask you what you mean by the use of the word direct there that you put in the answer that wasn't in the question. What do you mean?
Well, I said earlier that there are analytical observers like analysts, and they tend to look at technology companies and deliver pronouncements about them, and some of them will be positive about a company and some will be negative about a company. It's possible in looking at the general activities of Microsoft, one of those analysts formed a certain conclusion about Netscape and published that conclusion, and that might have had an effect. And so you could say that analysts may have had an effect. And analysts look at what Microsoft does, primarily in the products, not as much what we say as what we do in shipping our products.
What I'm asking you about, of course, right now is the effect of what you were saying, or what was attributed to you. And I do want to come to the effect that your products had on Netscape as well. But right now I want to talk about the effect of what was attributed to you. And what I'm asking you is whether you believe that the publication of statements like this attributed to you adversely affected Netscape's business prospects.
I'm not aware of any specific effect. And my general experience is that when competitors had made statements about us, that doesn't have an effect, rather that the people who do analysis or the actual products get shipped are what cause effects on our business.
Do you think that the effect on Microsoft's business of competitors saying things about Microsoft is comparable to the effect on Netscape's business of Microsoft saying things like this about Netscape?
Are we now talking about what was published or what was said?
Well, we're talking about what was published here.
Okay, well then
Mr.
stick to that.
Yates. That's what I am, sir, because I understand that your testimony is that you just don't remember saying any of these quotations that these publications have attributed to you. That's why I'm asking about what is written here, because there's no doubt, you have no doubt that this was actually published, do you, sir?
I believe it was published.
Okay, so at least we know that the Financial Times published, quote, "Our business model works even if all internet software is free," close quote, says Mr. Gates. Quote, "We are still selling operating systems. What does Netscape's business model look like if that happens? Not very good," close quote. Now, I asked you whether you thought that the publication of that adversely affected Netscape's business prospects. And you then gave me an answer that talked about the effect on Microsoft of criticism of Microsoft. Do you recall that?
Well, that wasn't at all that I said. We can read back what I said.
If you'd like to have it read back, it's okay with me. I don't need to have it read back, but if I've got as much time as I need to finish the examination, sir, and I'm prepared to spend as many days here as I have to do that. I think the record is quite clear as to what your answer was, and I think it is quite clear that you kept going back to Microsoft's experience, and that's the only point I'm trying to get you to focus on. But do you recall that enough to answer the question, or do we need to go back? Either way is okay with me.
Go ahead and ask a question, and then I'll decide.
Okay. Do you think, because you're the one that brought up the effect on Microsoft of criticism, do you think the effect on Microsoft of criticism of it is comparable to the effect on Netscape of the publication of statements attributed to you, like, quote, "Our business model works even if all internet software is free," close quote, says Mr. Gates. Quote, "We are still selling operating systems. What does Netscape's business model look like if that happens? Not very good," close quote.
So you're supposing a case where I personally criticize Microsoft?
I'm not supposing anything at all, sir.
That's what you suggested.
No, sir. Let me try to be clear, and perhaps I'm not being clear.
Who's doing the criticism in your hypothetical?
Well, I think the only person that has mentioned the word criticism today is you. That I think it came out of your answer when you were talking about criticism of Microsoft. Now, if I've misremembered your testimony about that, I will stand corrected by the record. But my recollection is that I asked you whether you thought the publication of statements like this would adversely affect Netscape's business prospects. My recollection is that you gave me an answer, a substantial portion of which included a statement that it had been your experience that criticism of Microsoft didn't really affect your business.
No, I didn't say that. I said statements by competitors, whether critical or otherwise, I didn't think explained what happened to our business, but rather other factors could explain what happened to our business.
Okay, let me use statements. And if I misremembered the word criticism, I apologize. Do you think that the effect on Microsoft's business of statements about Microsoft by its competitors is comparable to the effect on Netscape's business of the publication of statements like, quote, our business model works even if all internet software is free, close quote, says Mr. Gates. Quote, we are still selling operating systems. What does Netscape's business model look like if that happens? Not very good, close quote. I wish this question had been answered simply. I think it could have been.
I gave you a very simple answer, that I was not aware of any effect on their business by the publication.
And that may have answered my question, sir. But because I know that you're a person that uses words very precisely, I need to be sure that we haven't missed something between the question and the answer. My question was whether you believed that this publication affected Netscape's business prospects. You said you didn't know of any effect, and I just want to be sure that your answer was meant to apply to the full breadth of my question.
The full breadth of your question?
Yes, sir. And if that's confusing to you, as I say, I will put the question as many times as I need to be sure that I get it clear to you. My question, and unfortunately I'm going to have to quote it again.
There's no need. There's really no need.
But my question, sir, is whether you believe that the publication of statements like the statement in the Financial Times that, quote, our business model works even if all internet software is free, close quote, says Mr. Gates. Quote, we are still selling operating systems. What does Netscape's business model look like if that happens? Not very good, close quote. Adversely affects Netscape's business prospects.
I told you I'm not aware of any effects on Netscape by the publication of that statement.
Finish your answer.
Yes?
Do you believe that the publication of that statement adversely affects Netscape's business prospects, whether you are aware of precisely what those effects are or not?
Well, I'm not absolutely sure, but I did explain to you that in the analogous situation, the effect is not come from that, but from other factors.
And what is the analogous situation that you refer to?
Statements by competitors about Microsoft.
And do you believe that statements by competitors about Microsoft are analogous in terms of their effect on Microsoft to statements like this about Netscape?
I'm not absolutely sure what you mean by like this, but in general, yes.
By like this, I mean the quotation in the Financial Times article.
I don't know what it means to be like that?
Is that because you don't understand the word like, or because you don't understand what it means to be like something?
Neither.
What is it then?
I stated in quite a broad way that statements by competitors about us have not been a factor to explain future developments in our business prospect, but rather other factors explain any changes in our business prospects. And I'll say that broadly about competitive statements by competitors.
Statements by competitors about Microsoft?
That's right.
Now what I'm asking about is not statements about Microsoft by competitors, but I'm asking about statements about Netscape. And the question that I had most recently asked, that I thought was simpler than it's turning out to be, is whether you believed that statements about Microsoft by its competitors would have an analogous effect on Microsoft to statements like the one published in the Financial Times in 1996, in June, that we've been looking at. Do you think, Mr. Gates, that Microsoft's giving away of its Internet Explorer browser for free adversely affected Netscape's business?
Objection.
I don't know what distinction you're drawing.
I'm talking about the statement.
The word "the browser," when I talked about it being free and forever free, was talking about the browser functionality of Windows.
But when you talked about it, you used the word browser, not browser functionality. Correct, sir?
I don't remember the exact words. It's very possible I used that shorthand.
And you talked about the browser being forever free. Did you not, sir?
Are you asking me about exact words?
Yes,
or are you
I'm
asking
asking
me
you
to
about the
explain what I
exact
said?
words. I'm asking about the exact words. Did you say the exact words that the browser was going to be forever free?
If you're asking me about exact words, I don't recall the exact words that were used.
Is it your testimony that you do not, as you sit here now, recall saying that the browser would be forever free?
Those exact words?
Those exact words.
I'd want to see the context and be reminded about that. I don't remember using those exact words.
Okay. Do you remember using the words forever free? Those exact words.
Those two words?
Yes.
I'm sure I used those before I was 5 years old.
Really? With respect to what?
Forever free. I want to be forever free.
Okay. Did you ever use those with respect to the browser?
If you're asking, is there a sentence that if you did a string search would have exactly those words in it, I'm not sure.
Okay.
I did say that we would keep, I did deliver that intent, that is that the browsing functionality in Windows was not something that we intended it at some time in the future to charge extra for.
And what you're telling me is you don't remember whether you just used the words forever free. That's what you're saying.
I may have.
You may have.
The general notion of the Windows browser functionality staying free in the future was certainly communicated by me.
Okay. Thank you. What products has Microsoft said publicly, whether in response to a question or otherwise, that these would explicitly be forever free?
I've said that about the broad feature set that's in Windows.
When did you say that, sir?
Oh, I remember an analyst talking to me about that once at an analyst meeting.
When was that?
Well, it would have been one of our annual analyst meetings.
When?
Not this year, either last year or the year before.
Is there a transcript of that analyst meeting?
Not with the conversation with that analyst, no.
Oh, there are transcripts of analyst meetings, though, aren't there, Mr. Gates?
Only of the formal Q&A, not of the most of the Q&A, which is where people are mixing around with the press and analysts who come to the event.
And this question that you say happened after the transcript stopped being taken?
That's my recollection, yeah. We price our product, Windows. That's the only thing we do relative to pricing. The most important thing we do is we create the features of the product, including improved versions.
Let me be sure my question is clear. Was any part of Microsoft's actions with respect to its browser, or as you sometimes refer to it, browser technology, motivated by a desire to drive Netscape's revenues from users of Netscape's browser down to zero?
Well, I think you're getting a little bit psychological there.
No, I'm asking what you intended. What was the purpose of what you were doing?
Our purpose was to make Windows a better product and maintain and increase the popularity of Windows.
Was that the only purpose?
That was the purpose on which the decision was made.
I just want to be clear. It's your testimony that an intent to deprive Netscape of revenue played no role in any of the decisions that Microsoft made with respect to browsers or browsing technology. Is that your testimony?
Well, our decision to have the browser be a feature of Windows was in no way motivated by something to do with Netscape. We had chosen that that was a logical evolution of the Windows feature set before Netscape was a factor at all.
Mr. Gates, if your answer is that it played no role, that is your answer, but I need to get on the record what your answer is. And my question is whether an intent to deprive Netscape of revenue played any role in any of the decisions that Microsoft made with respect to its browser or browsing technology.
We decided that it was a logical improvement of Windows to put the browser into Windows before we had much awareness of there even being a Netscape. So the decision that that would be a feature, and as I've said, when we make something a feature of Windows, that means that it's available along with all the other features in the license fee. That decision had been made very early on. We also had a very early recognition of the potential revenue sources from things like the search button and the home page, and that those would become quite substantial. Let's say we decide to put a new feature in. Is that included in what you're asking about?
A new feature in what?
In our internet browser technology.
If the purpose is to deprive Netscape of revenue, if that's why you put it in, yes, it is included, sir. And if you don't understand the question, if my question is not clear, I will rephrase it. You can tell me the answer is yes, you can say the answer is no, you can say the answer is I don't recall, you say your question is so confusing to me I can't answer it. But all I'm trying to do is find out what your answer is.
Well,
do you have the question in mind?
I think it's quite a vague question. Let me just give you a hypothetical to understand. Let's say we think users want a feature, and it can be a feature that we're doing first, or it's a feature that Netscape has done first. When we decided to put that feature in, our primary goal is to make Windows more popular and build momentum for Windows. But certainly there is, let's say it's a feature that Netscape's done first. You know, then we are thinking, okay, will users be interested in our browser? If it's a feature we've done first, we're thinking, will users be interested in our browser? So you can't say that, you know, as you get into 1996, that we're unaware of Netscape, and even though what we're primarily doing is related to making better experiences for customers and all that, the fact that we'll be compared with them in terms of how people choose browsers, we're aware of that.
I didn't mean my question to suggest that you might have been unaware of Netscape in 1996, Mr. Gates. I assume that you were aware of Netscape in 1996. My question is whether an intent to deprive Netscape of revenue played any role in any of the decisions that you made about browsers or browsing technology. I'm not talking about a decision where you say, I understand this will have an effect on Netscape, but I don't care. I'm going to do it anyway. I'm talking about a situation in which, at least in part, you take an action with the intended purpose of depriving Netscape of revenue. Did you do that?
Well, the original decision to include the browser into Windows as a feature of Windows was not taken in response to some thinking about Netscape. But once you get out into a period where we're looking at Netscape as one of our competitors, it's very hard to say, you know, did that influence our decisions or not? To me, that's a very vague question. It's one of the facts we are aware of. Our primary goal, of course, is to make Windows better for customers, and we were doing a lot of great stuff there, and we're actually very successful once we got past a certain point in doing a product that people did decide to choose. But you know, how can you say, you know, when every person at Microsoft makes any decision, you know, we don't get to run it where there's no thought about Netscape and there is a thought about Netscape. So you're asking me to reach into people's minds and do something that I think is strange.
Would you read back my question one more time? And again incorporate it. The original one.
Question is whether an intent to deprive Netscape of revenue played any role in any of the decisions that Microsoft made with respect to its browser or browsing technology.
Have you answered that question now to the fullest extent that you can, Mr. Gates? Because if you can, we'll just stop.
I find the question unclear enough that I'm afraid I won't be able to do any better than I already have.
Okay.
We looked at charging as part of the IE3 planning during 1996.
I'm not asking when you looked at charging. I'm asking when did Microsoft first make an estimate or projection of how much money it would receive?
Oh, when we looked at the issue of whether it was a better idea to charge or not as part of the IE3 planning.
And that would have been in 1996. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
You have to say yes or no for that.
Yes. You don't get mm-hmm.
She does, but it doesn't always come out exactly the way you think. And who made that estimate or projection?
Well, I know there was discussion with Pete Higgins and Peter Newport and myself about that, and each of us would have hazarded some view of the value there.
And what was the projection or estimate that you made as to how much money Microsoft would receive from browser advertising, and when?
I don't recall the exact number.
Approximately.
I honestly don't recall the number.
Can you give me any approximation or range at all?
Would have been in this period, Netscape had done a deal to sell their search button traffic, some portion of it, for something like $15 million. And of course they had a much higher usage of their browser than we did of ours. And so depending on what you thought our usage would be, you could prorate in and look at what Netscape was getting on their search deals and other deals, and do the estimate based on that.
Let me distinguish between two things. One is you're sitting here right now and doing a logical estimate, and the second is whether you remember what your estimate was back in 1996.
I don't remember what the estimate is, but I think I'm being quite helpful to you in telling you facts that went into making that estimate back in 1996, because Netscape had already monetized some portion of their search button traffic.
I appreciate your help, but what I'd like to do, if I could, is approach it my way, because for me it's easier to understand it my way if I take it question by question. And the first question is, do you now recall anything at all about the estimate that you made back in 1996 as to how much advertising revenue Microsoft would receive from the browser?
And my answer is directly related to that, which is I would have taken, I don't recall the number, but I would have taken the revenue Netscape was getting and used that to come up with what the number might look like for us proportional to our traffic. That's what I recall about that.
What you're saying is you don't recall what the number was,
no,
but you do recall the methodology that would be used to arrive at the number.
That's right.
Now, focusing on the number, I want to ask you the question that I always do in these circumstances, which is, do you recall any estimate or range of what the number was? I know you've given me a methodology, and that is helpful, and I appreciate it. But I also want to know whether you recall anything at all about approximately what the number actually was that you came up with, or what the range would be.
Well, there's several variables. Nobody can just say a number. You have to decide how much the internet's going to increase in popularity. You have to decide over what period of time you're trying to estimate this number. You have to decide what the traffic share of IE will be. And then you sort of take the Netscape traffic at that point in time and use that, and say, is the monetized traffic sort of per hit going to become equally valuable, less valuable, or more valuable?
And is that what you did back then?
That's what I recall we did.
Okay, now, what I'm trying to find out is if you recall at all, what was the approximate number that you came up with, or what was the range within which the number, in your terminology, with a high degree of probability, would fall?
I'm sure that we came up with different numbers with the different assumptions, but I don't recall any of those numbers.
Okay. Or do you recall approximately what any of those numbers were?
I could only do it by going back to the algorithm I've described to you and sort of using that data now and computing numbers. In terms of a recollection of any numbers based on the various assumptions that have to be made back in that time frame, no.
Okay. You were asked some questions earlier about a June 21, 1995 meeting with Netscape. And that's a meeting you did not attend. Am I correct?
I've never met with Netscape.
And did you know that Microsoft people were meeting with Netscape before they actually met?
I don't recall knowing in advance.
You did know after the fact because you got the emails that we saw, correct?
Yeah, that's right. I recall getting those emails, at least the Thomas Reardon Silverberg one. Now, I'm not aware of any such thing, and I know it's very much against the way we operate.
It would be against company policy to do that.
That's right.
Now, subsequent to being apprised that Mr. Andreessen, at least, was asserting that this had happened, did you make any effort to find out what had actually happened at that meeting?
Well, first of all, I don't want to be involved in characterizing what Mr. Andreessen said, because all I know is something about a quote about a dead horse head or something like that. That was what I recall from the Wall Street Journal article. I did, after the Wall Street Journal article, see some email that Andreessen had sent our people after the meeting saying it was a great meeting. And I did see the Reardon mail that I deleted, but somebody gave back to me, and some Reardon notes from the meeting. Now, I think we're talking about the same meeting. I think there may have been more than one, but in any case, I think we're talking about the same meeting.
I think the record may show that there was a meeting before the June 21 meeting.
That sounds right.
But the meeting that I was particularly asking about was the June 21 meeting, and I think that probably was what was in the Wall Street Journal.
No, you can't really say, because the Wall Street Journal talked about a May meeting, and May is not June.
You're right.
Not by a long shot.
May is not June. I agree with May is not June, and maybe there were two such meetings. I don't.
Well, I'm not aware of any meeting between us and Netscape in May, so that seems very strange. And that confused me about that Wall Street Journal article.
Let me ask you, did you, when you saw the Wall Street Journal article and talked about a May meeting in terms of allegedly market-dividing conduct, did you try to find out whether there had been a May meeting between representatives of Microsoft and representatives of Netscape?
Well, again, I wouldn't characterize the article in that way. When I read the article, what it said interested me enough and concerned me enough. I did seek to find out if there was a May meeting, but I don't think the article is what you're said what you're suggesting. I mean, we should get a copy of the article. I don't remember it that way.
Okay.
I remember Andreessen talking about how he'd been in fear that Don Corleone had come to see him, and once I realized that there was no meeting in May, and it wasn't, that he after the meeting said he enjoyed the meeting and that it was, just a group of our guys down there trying to talk about if there was any areas of cooperation. The whole thing seemed very strange to me.
Did you talk to people to find out whether there was a May meeting?
Yes.
Who'd you talk to?
I consulted with my lawyers.
Other than consulting with your lawyers, did you try to find out whether there was a May meeting?
Well, my lawyers then talked to all the people that might have met with Netscape, and I made sure they did that pretty broadly.
And you were informed that there was no May meeting? Is that your testimony?
That's the understanding I was given, yes. And then I was given some of the other information that I've already mentioned.
But all that information came from your lawyers, not from non-lawyer employees of Microsoft. Is that what you're saying?
It came to me through my lawyers.
Did you ever have a conversation with anyone in the last 12 months, other than your lawyers, concerning whether there were meetings in May or June of 1995 with Netscape, and if so, what happened at those meetings?
Well, might have been a point after I got all the data from the lawyers, where I said to some of the PR people what an outrageous slander that article had been and how unfair I felt it was, and so I may have mentioned that to them.
Did you have any conversations in the last 12 months with any person who was dealing with Netscape in 1995 about whether there were May or June meetings, and if so, what happened at those meetings?
No, I relied on the lawyers to go in and meet with those people and gather the facts and educate me about was there a May meeting and what was the agenda or what was Andreessen's state of mind after the meeting, what did the notes look like. But that's all very recent. That is after the journal article.
Now, have you ever read the complaint in this case?
No.
Have you ever received a summary of the complaint in this case?
I wouldn't say I've received a summary, no. I've talked to my lawyers about the case, but not really the complaint.
Do you know whether in the complaint there is an assertion? I'm not talking about the Wall Street Journal article. I'm talking about the complaint that was filed last May. Do you know whether in that complaint there are allegations concerning a 1995 meeting between Netscape and Microsoft representatives relating to alleged market division discussions?
I haven't read the complaint, so I don't know for sure, but I think somebody said that is in there.
Did you find that out before or after the Wall Street Journal article?
The first time I knew about these allegations was the Wall Street Journal article.